Congratulate, you have 15 minutes left, not because the clock has been cruel, nor because time has abandoned you, but because at last you stand in the sharpest clarity a mortal is ever granted. You see, most of our lives are lived in a fog of assumptions, as if tomorrow were a certainty and the hourglass inexhaustible. We walk about with calendars full and plans half written, imagining 1,000 days spread out before us like a banquet. Yet when the steward leans in and whispers, "You have only a quarter of an hour," suddenly every breath becomes heavy with meaning, and the most ordinary moment carries a weight beyond gold. For there is a strange dignity in the nearness of endings, a seriousness that dignifies even the smallest gesture. It is not that time has grown more sacred in the last 15 minutes than it was in the last 15 years, but that at last you have awakened to its sacredness. You have been told what was true all along, only now it presses on you with the urgency of thunder. Imagine a man sitting in a great hall filled with voices, laughter and light. For hours he drinks, talks, and forgets the passing of the clock, until someone gently touches his arm and says, "The feast will end soon." Suddenly, he sees what he had not noticed before. The servants are gathering dishes. The candles have burned low, and each moment of joy is no longer common but precious, for it will not return. That is what the final minutes do. They take what was overlooked and transfigure it into treasure. The sound of a friend's voice, the curve of light on the wall, the beating of one's own heart, all become magnificent in their mortality. We congratulate, not because the end is easy, but because in these moments we are permitted to see with eyes unclouded what we should have seen from the beginning. That time is not cheap, that life is not expendable, that every tick of the clock is already eternity brushing against us. The dignity of final moments lies not only in their gravity but in their revelation. Most men live as if time were a river that runs endlessly through their fields. They dip a hand in when they like, they step back when they please, and they suppose there will always be more. But the truth is that time is not their property, and the river does not flow for them. It flows past them, and when the last drop has touched their hands, they cannot summon it back. Only when one is told, 15 minutes remain, does he realize that he has been a guest, not a master, and that the river has always been on loan. This realization, though sharp and even cruel, restores his dignity, because it restores him to the truth. For there is no dignity in illusion, no nobility in the man who pretends to own what he never did. But when he knows that the stream is nearly gone, he at last knows himself, a creature bounded, fragile, dependent, and yet invited into a story larger than his measure. To be told you have 15 minutes left is to be given the gift of proportion. Suddenly, the petty envies that have gnawed at you for decades lose their fangs. The quarrels you rehearsed vanish like mist, for there is no time to keep them warm. The possessions you polished and defended reveal themselves as trinkets that cannot follow you into the dark. And strangely, the heart softens toward things once despised. The neighbor you avoided, the child you ignored, the God you postponed. They appear now in urgent color, as if the whole canvas of life had been turned by a shaft of light. You see that to love, to forgive, to speak truth, to kneel, to weep, to rejoice, these alone are fitting uses of the final quarter hour. That is dignity. To spend the last crumbs of time, not clutching at vanity, but standing in harmony with what matters. The true weight of time is revealed when its measure shrinks, for then one can no longer waste it without knowing he does so. There is another aspect of this strange dignity, one that unsettles us more deeply. For when the last minutes arrive, not only do we see the value of what is left, we also see the worthlessness of what we lost. Every empty hour, every careless indulgence, every moment of cruelty comes back to us with a sting sharper than any lash. In the nearness of ending, we do not only measure what remains, but also reckon with what is gone. And this reckoning, though painful, is itself honorable, for it reveals that our lives are not meaningless froth, but a serious thing, with a ledger that matters. If time could be squandered without consequence, then its loss would cause no grief. But when 15 minutes remain, grief itself testifies to the gravity of what was squandered. And yet even here there is dignity, for grief is the shadow of love, and repentance is the echo of hope. To feel the sting of wasted hours is already to acknowledge that hours are not trifles, and to know regret is to confess the eternal weight of time. Now, let us imagine those 15 minutes not in despair, but in gratitude. To be told, your time is almost done, is dreadful if you have lived as though time were endless. But if you have walked as a steward, then the last quarter hour is no thief but a herald. It declares, your task is nearly complete. Your labor has not been in vain. It is as when the runner sees the finish line and straightens his shoulders for the last stretch, not ashamed that the race ends, but proud that it was run. There is dignity in endings, not because they are painless, but because they are purposeful. An endless life without urgency would be a blur, but a bounded life, drawn by time's line, has shape and meaning. To know that one has 15 minutes is to be called to live the last strokes of the picture with intensity, knowing the artist himself will soon set down the brush. The value of final minutes also lies in their impartiality. They come to the king and the beggar alike, to the scholar and the fool, to the saint and the scoffer. Time is the great democrat, bestowing its last fragment without prejudice. And in that even-handedness, we find another layer of dignity. The man who thought himself superior because of wealth or birth is humbled when told his minutes are as few as the pauper's. The man who thought himself forgotten because of poverty is exalted, for the king cannot purchase an extra second beyond what the beggar holds. 15 minutes left is a crown that makes equals of us all. It strips away illusions of greatness and inferiority, and it presses on each person the same noble burden to use what remains with honesty. In this way, the approach of the end is the final act of justice. For no man may hide behind excuses of privilege or neglect. He stands with 15 minutes like all men, and what he does with them is the measure of his soul. There is yet another paradox here, one that startles those who dare to notice. When 15 minutes remain, we suddenly find ourselves not less free but more free. For the infinite expanse of time is, in a sense, a prison of choices. When hours stretch endlessly, the weight of someday enslaves us. We can always say, I will forgive tomorrow, I will speak tomorrow, I will believe tomorrow. And thus we never do. But when tomorrow is gone and only minutes remain, all the false doors of delay are slammed shut and the one true door is opened. You cannot wander in endless indecision, you must act now. And in that necessity there is liberty. The prisoner of delay becomes the free man of urgency. He sees at last that the only moment ever given is this one, and he may at last live it as though it were real. That freedom, born of brevity, is a dignity beyond all illusion. Therefore, to congratulate one who has 15 minutes left is not mockery but mercy. It is to say you are awake now, awake in a way that perhaps you have never been. The veil is thin, the truth is near, and what you do now is not lost in a haze of later, but shines against the backdrop of eternity. This is the strange dignity of final moments, that they reveal to us, with terrifying and wonderful clarity, what has always been true, that time is sacred, that life is fragile, and that every moment is an invitation to stand in awe of the eternal. You have 15 minutes left, not because time has betrayed you, but because at last you are roused from the enchantment that hours are infinite and days unending. For the peril of human life is not merely death itself, but the quiet delusion that death will never quite arrive. We live as though the calendar stretches forever, as though every dawn guarantees another dusk, and so we postpone, neglect, and squander. The heart beats on, the sun rises, the world hums its ceaseless rhythm, and we, lulled by repetition, imagine that the dance will continue without halt. But the truth is more severe. The hours are numbered, the sands in the glass finite, and our assumption of abundance is the most dangerous lie of all. It is perilous not simply because it is false, but because it makes us blind to the good we might have done and the evil we might have turned from. If only we had known the truth. To live as though time is endless is to live as though nothing matters very much. To be startled awake by brevity is to recover the sharpness of reality, the grace that comes when one is shaken and told, your life is not inexhaustible, and your chance to live rightly is now. Consider the child who imagines his parents immortal, who grows up under the shelter of their presence without imagining it will one day vanish. He speaks with them, quarrels with them, dismisses them, and always assumes he can do so again tomorrow. Yet one day the chair is empty, the voice silent, and he realizes that tomorrow never arrived. In that moment he learns, too late perhaps, the peril of presuming on time. And yet there is grace even in the sorrow, for he awakens to the truth that all relationships, all opportunities, all choices hang on the fragile thread of now. This awakening, though painful, saves him from deeper folly. It is mercy to be startled by brevity, even if it comes wrapped in loss, for only then does he see the urgency of love. The danger of endless time thinking is that it makes us careless. We drift into habits of delay. I will write that letter someday. I will reconcile someday. I will pray someday. I will pursue the noble someday. Someday becomes our shield against the demand of the present. But someday is the most deceptive word in the human tongue, because it feels like a promise but delivers nothing. It whispers comfort while robbing us of reality. We forget that the storehouse of time does not belong to us. We are tenants, not owners. We are like farmers who sow nothing all spring, because they assume autumn will wait, only to discover the frost has come early. To live as though hours are endless is to waste the field. And so it is grace, a severe grace, when we are startled awake by brevity. For then the frost shakes us. The harvest calls us, and we learn at last to sow while the soil is still soft beneath our feet. Think of the traveler who delays his departure, lounging in the station as though the train could never leave without him. He shops, he eats, he does, until suddenly the whistle blows, the wheels churn, and he realizes the train is gone. The peril of endless hours is just this: we think the train will always wait. But the whistle will sound whether we are ready or not. The shock of hearing it too soon is bitter, but the grace of hearing it at all is a gift. For some never hear until it is too late, and the train is gone forever. To be startled while minutes remain is mercy, because it gives us a chance to leap aboard while there is still motion under our feet. This peril is not only personal but universal. Civilizations, like men, imagine their days unending. They build towers, gather wealth, and presume that the earth will bow to them forever. Rome imagined herself eternal, her legions unconquerable, her dominion without limit. Yet the barbarians stood at the gate, and the eternal city fell. Nations today are no different, boasting of progress, trusting in science, imagining that history bends inevitably toward their glory. Yet time is not theirs to command. The peril of endless time thinking infects not just individuals but empires, and the grace of brevity's reminder is that it shatters arrogance before it is too late. The fall of Rome, the crumble of dynasties, the ashes of revolutions, all are sermons that time is shorter than we think, and those who heed the sermon may live wisely in the shadow of brevity. There is a peculiar blindness that comes with abundance. When we hold an apple, we taste it with delight, savoring every bite. But when we stand before a mountain of apples, we grow careless, we eat without noticing, we let them rot. So it is with time. When hours seem endless, each moment is swallowed thoughtlessly. But when hours are scarce, we taste them with awe. Scarcity sharpens gratitude, and brevity trains us to cherish. Thus the grace of being startled awake is not merely that it warns us of the end, but that it teaches us how to value the middle. For if life were truly endless, would any moment mean much? Infinity without urgency becomes a haze, but finitude gives shape and brilliance. We should be grateful that the clock strikes, not bitter, for in striking it teaches us to treasure. One of the most perilous illusions is the notion that repentance may always be delayed. How many souls murmur, "I will change tomorrow, I will turn back tomorrow, I will surrender tomorrow," never seeing that tomorrow is not theirs to guarantee. The habit of delay calcifies the heart until it cannot move when the hour truly comes. The peril is not only that the time runs out, but that our own will wither us in the waiting. Delay hardens us. The longer we assume endless time, the less able we become to act when brevity confronts us. That is why grace must come like a thunderclap, startling us awake. Better to be shaken violently now than to sleep smoothly into ruin. The mercy of brevity's reminder is that it breaks the spell before the heart is beyond hearing. Consider too the comedy, almost cruel, that we are shocked when reminded of brevity, though every tick of the clock has been preaching it to us since birth. The child grows to youth, the youth to age, and still we pretend that decay is an accident. The mirror tells us we are not endless. The graves around us testify, and yet we walk as if immortal. Then one day a doctor, or an accident, or a sudden silence tells us what we should have known: your time is shorter than you thought. And in that shock, there is both terror and grace. Terror, because the lie we clung to has collapsed. Grace, because the truth has entered in before the final bell. We congratulate, not the loss of hours, but the opening of eyes. There is also a curious beauty in the brevity that awakens us. For if we had lived forever, would we ever have urgency to love? Would we ever forgive, or strive, or hope? Endless leisure breeds endless postponement. But a brief span, sharply bounded, calls forth our best. The soldier in the last stand, the artist on his final canvas, the mother holding her newborn, knowing her days are few. These know an intensity of life that eternity of leisure could never grant. The brevity that startles us is not our enemy but our tutor. It teaches us the concentrated flame of living truly, as opposed to the dull smoke of endless delay. Some imagine that to live under the shadow of brevity is a cruelty, that constant awareness of death steals joy. But in truth, it deepens joy. For when you know that time is fragile, you stop trampling it. You drink the cup with reverence, you hold the hand with tenderness, you speak the word with care. The peril of endless time thinking is that it numbs us, while the grace of brevity awakens us to glory. The laughter is richer when you know it will not last forever. The sunset is more radiant when you know it will fall into night. Even sorrow is more profound when you know it is fleeting, for you can endure what you know will end. Thus the grace of brevity is not only that it warns, but that it beautifies. It is worth noting that brevity, when it strikes, strips us of illusionary control. The man who imagines endless hours also imagines endless power, as though he can master time by mere possession of it. But when he hears, 15 minutes remain, he learns that he was never master at all. He sees himself as creature, not creator, dependent, not sovereign. This humility, forced upon him, is itself a form of grace, for only the humble can see reality clearly. The peril of endless hours is pride, the grace of brevity is humility, and humility, though bitter in taste, is the root of all wisdom. Thus when we say, "Congratulate, you have 15 minutes left," we are not mocking but blessing. We are declaring that the peril has been exposed, the illusion shattered, the fog burned away. You stand in clarity now. You are free of the delusion that tomorrow is guaranteed. You are free of the poison that told you there was no hurry to love, to forgive, to believe. You are startled, yes, perhaps trembling, but awake, and in that awakening lies grace. Congratulate, you have 15 minutes left, not because the sands in the glass are slipping away faster than before, but because in this narrow window the true grandeur of human existence is laid bare. For if there is anything more dreadful than running out of time, it is never realizing that time demands decision. We shuffle through our days as though they were idle coins, to be spent carelessly on trifles, never noticing that each moment is heavy with consequence. Yet when the announcement comes, 15 minutes remain, suddenly the curtain is pulled back, and what seemed trivial shines with eternal significance. We see that every breath, every glance, every thought carries weight beyond itself. The invitation of urgency is not merely to move quickly, but to move rightly. It is not the frantic rush of a shopper late for closing, but the solemn realization of a judge handing down a verdict where the smallest stroke of the pen alters the destiny of years. Urgency is the mercy that awakens us to the eternal weight of choice. We are creatures suspended between two worlds, the fleeting and the everlasting. And it is in the collision of these realms that choice takes on its true power. The last 15 minutes are not only a countdown but a summons, as though the very air trembles with question. What will you choose, now that delay is no longer possible? For choice is never neutral. To forgive or to withhold, to love or to despise, to believe or to scoff, each path is a doorway opening into eternity. The invitation of urgency is that it clears away the dust of excuses. When the clock strikes near its end, you cannot say, "Later I will reconcile," or "Tomorrow I will pray." Tomorrow has been dismissed from the courtroom. Only now is permitted to speak, and now demands decision. There is dignity here, but also a terrifying beauty. For if the final quarter hour presses us, it is because every moment of life has always pressed us. We were never free of the weight of choice, only ignorant of it. Think of a soldier on the battlefield, told that in a quarter of an hour the final trumpet will sound and the battle will close. He may drop his weapon and flee, or he may stand his ground with courage. That quarter hour magnifies his decision. But in truth, every hour of the battle carried the same significance. The difference is that urgency has stripped away illusion. The soldier cannot pretend that the war is endless, nor that his actions are insignificant. He stands face to face with meaning. So too with us. We imagine that ordinary days are neutral, that only in extraordinary crises do our choices matter. But the grace of brevity's summons is that it reveals the lie. Every word to a neighbor, every thought about a stranger, every secret gesture unseen by others, all echo in eternity. Urgency does not create significance, it reveals it. The peril of endless postponement is that it numbs the will. We imagine that choices may be deferred without consequence, that neutrality is possible. But to delay is itself a choice, a silent alignment with neglect. When urgency comes crashing in, it rescues us from the fantasy of neutrality. With 15 minutes left, you cannot remain undecided. To stand still is to choose stillness, to wait is to choose waste. The weight of the moment presses until you must declare yourself one way or another. And here lies the strange mercy, it is better to choose in clarity, even trembling, than to drift in fog forever. For drifting is the most tragic fate of all, a life neither warm nor cold, neither faithful nor defiant, simply wasted in hesitation. The invitation of urgency is to step out of drifting and into declaration, to say with your last quarter hour, "This is who I am. This is what I believe, this is whom I serve." Choice, when seen through the lens of urgency, becomes luminous. The forgiveness you offer in the final minutes shines brighter than 1,000 idle hours of polite indifference. The prayer whispered in urgency carries more truth than 100 distracted recitations. The hand you grasp in reconciliation has the weight of eternity behind it, and so urgency does not diminish freedom but exalts it. For what greater honor can a mortal bear than to hold in trembling hands the power to shape eternity with a single choice? The last quarter hour is not a theft, but a coronation, crowning you with the dignity of decision. You may despair that the time is short, but do not despise the gift of its intensity. 15 minutes rightly lived can outweigh decades squandered. The scales of eternity are not measured by length alone, but by the truth inscribed in each choice. Consider the thief on the cross, whose life had been a litany of squandered years. His record was stained, his opportunities wasted, his time nearly gone. And yet in his final moments, pressed by urgency, he chose to cry out for mercy. That cry, breathed in agony, outweighed all his wasted past. The eternal weight of his choice resounded beyond death. Here is the wondered urgency is not the enemy of redemption, but its friend. For many a soul drifts through years of indifference, only to be awakened by the bell of brevity. 15 minutes remain, and suddenly the haze clears, the eternal is seen, and choice becomes unavoidable. Better the terror of a final decision than the apathy of endless delay. The invitation of urgency is that it grants us the honor of choosing while we still can. And yet there is a danger too. Urgency, if misread, can drive us to frenzy rather than clarity. We rush to grasp, to hoard, to panic, as if the value of the last minutes were in cramming them with activity. But the true invitation is not to scatter in haste, but to concentrate in truth. The weight of choice is not measured by the number of deeds, but by the direction of the heart. In 15 minutes one may love, forgive, trust, and surrender more deeply than in 15 years of half-hearted gestures. The point is not quantity but essence. Urgency calls us not to frantic noise but to decisive alignment. It is the stillness of a compass pointing true north in the storm, not the frenzy of a bird trapped in a cage. To see the eternal weight of choice is to realize that even a single word, yes or no, faith or unbelief, love or contempt, shapes destiny more than 1,000 trivial motions. Some will say, "It is cruel that the clock should press us so." But it is more cruel to be left forever in uncertainty. The kindness of urgency is that it forces the matter. A soul may wander for decades saying, "I will consider, I will weigh, I will decide someday." Someday never comes. The years pass, and the soul drifts farther from life. Then the clock tolls, 15 minutes left, and at last the soul sees that someday has evaporated. Now is all that remains, and in that now, decision burns with clarity. Yes, it is fearful, yes, it strips us bare. But what mercy to be stripped of illusions while choice still remains. The eternal weight of choice is a burden, but it is also an honor. To carry it even for 15 minutes is to be treated as more than dust. To be acknowledged as a being whose choices matter in eternity. This invitation is not to despair, but to courage. For urgency is not the grim face of doom, but the stern face of love. It says what you do now matters forever, so do not waste it. It is a call to nobility, to rise above the smallness of self and choose what aligns with truth, goodness, and beauty. The last quarter hour is not merely a warning of the end, but a trumpet announcing the grandeur of now. To see the eternal weight of choice is to realize that you stand at the crossroads of infinity every time you open your mouth, every time you stretch out your hand, every time you turn your thought. 15 minutes may seem little, but in the scale of eternity it is vast enough to bear the heaviest decision a human can make. Therefore, congratulate, you have 15 minutes left, for you have been summoned into the arena where choice is clear, and your dignity shines brightest. The fog of delay has been banished, the illusion of endless time shattered, and before you lies the sober, magnificent truth, that every moment is charged with eternity, and in this final quarter hour you are invited to see it plainly, to embrace it fully, to choose with the weight of forever pressing upon your soul.